Today, Intel admits their release was a disaster. The 9800X3D destroys at the same frequency. AMD is winning on all fronts, and the Ryzen Max APU specs just leaked. Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. Before I get to today's first story, with Christmas coming up fast, there are tons of early Black Friday deals on Newegg and some on Amazon right now. So if you want to pick up something special for a family member who loves PC hardware, or you want to give your relatives an idea of what you want, I'll have affiliate links to those sales down in the description below. It doesn't cost you anything more, and it helps the channel out. Okay, it's news time, and first up for today, Intel just admitted that their new Core Ultra 200 series of CPUs have been a disaster, specifically referring to the fact that plenty of reviews show that their newest CPUs, this right here you can see 285K, is literally worse than their last gen. This story originally comes from an actual quote from Robert Halleck from Intel, where he says, quote, "I think what people have been interested to hear is what happened. I can't go into all the details yet, but we identified a series of multi-factor issues at the OS level, at the BIOS level, and I will say that the performance we saw in reviews, though no fault of reviewers, is not what we expected and not what we intended. The launch just didn't go as planned. That has been a humbling lesson for all of us, inspiring a fairly large response internally to get to the bottom of what happened and to fix it." Now, this was a live stream, and he seemed to be referring specifically to gaming, but what's odd is that Intel themselves made it clear that the 285K would be slower in gaming in one of their slides. So I'm really not sure what we can expect out of this. The update is expected at the end of this month or early next month, but either way, Intel really botched this one. And next up for today, if you thought AMD's Ryzen 9800X3D was an awesome release, well, it's about to get even better. Because over at Computer Base, they recently did a comparative test between last gen's 7800X3D and current gen's 9800X3D. And basically what they did, they didn't just compare it like everyone else. They actually took both of those CPUs and compared them at the same frequency, specifically at 4.8 gigahertz. Not only that, but on these platforms, they all basically shared the same thing. So we're talking DDR5 5200 memory, the same Asus ROG X670E Hero motherboard, all of that good stuff. And then they compared it in a few games. And what we got is the fact that the 9800X3D still crushes the 7800X3D. You can see right here that it is in fact 14% faster than last gen's 7800X3D. In fact, when I did the math, it was like 14.7%, so it's closer to 15% faster. And of course, that may not sound all that great, not that big of a deal, except for the fact that once again, we're talking at the same frequency. Meaning the difference likely has to do with obviously it being Zen 5 versus Zen 4, but then potentially that new 3D V cache. Basically, AMD's new monster gaming CPU is even better than what we originally thought. And speaking of AMD doing better, AMD just came back in probably one of their biggest ways ever. As you can see right here, AMD just captured 28.7% of the desktop market share in Q3 2024. In fact, this is the most market share gain that AMD has had in the desktop x86 CPU market share since, well, when we're talking one quarter to another, since Q3 of 2016. We are talking a very impressive 5.7 percentage points boost from last quarter. Not only that, but they also saw a boost in market share with the client x86 going from 21.1 to 23.9. Then they also gained a fairly decent one in mobile, and then a slightly higher market share in the server space. As far as why that is, it likely has to do with multiple things. Obviously, the Ryzen 9000 series was released not too long ago, but that wasn't exactly all that well received. Really, the biggest thing that I think has to do with Intel's just fiasco of, well, not just what it was, but also how they handled it when it came to the 14th and 13th gen CPUs basically frying themselves. That obviously would have had at least somewhat of an impact, but really, I feel like it makes most people think, because when they would compare Intel and AMD, they would always try to say, well, Intel CPUs, they just work. Well, this really hurt that perception of them. But of course, that's just my opinion. Either way, this is clearly having a massive impact pretty much across the entire industry. But with that said, it also really does go to show of just how much of a market share Intel had just a few years ago, and in fact, how much they still retain. And lastly for today, pretty much the full specs of AMD's next-gen monster Ryzen Max APUs have finally leaked. Remember that these are the APUs that are set to come with an integrated GPU that comes with as much as 40 CUs. Once again, we're talking mid to high-end GPU in an APU. As you can see right here, this one originally comes from the well-known leaker at this point, Golden Pig Upgrade. This is a Chinese leaker who has definitely been right many times in the past. And as you can see, it looks like, if this is correct, AMD is set to release 4 new APUs. The Ryzen AI Max Plus 395, and yes, they do have the Pro moniker, likely because these are more kind of looking at workstation notebooks, but obviously anyone can get them. Then we have the Ryzen AI Max 390, the Ryzen Max 385, Ryzen Max 380. And right off the bat, you'll notice that he also includes something that we have not seen yet, and that is the naming scheme for these new GPUs. They are set to be the Radeon 8000 series, likely because the RX 8000 desktop GPUs are probably releasing right alongside them, so that makes sense why they call them this. But the top end one is the 8060S, then we have the 8050S, and then not so sure about the lowest end model, but you'll notice that the top 2 models come with the 8060S, meaning a whopping 40 CUs. So if you really just want a game and you really don't think that you're going to need all these cores, though the 16-core may obviously come with slightly higher clocks, but probably not enough to really make much of a difference in most games. So if you only want a game, you may be better off just getting the 12-core model. Either way, you are going to have options here with the 40 CU model. Then with the 385, we have an 8-core 16-thread CPU. Oh, and all of these support LPDDR5X memory up to 8000. And this one is the 8050S, and it comes with 32 CUs. Finally, we have the Ryzen Max Pro 380. This is a 6-core 12-thread CPU with 16 CUs. Ultimately, like I've been saying for quite a while now, these bad boys are set to completely disrupt the mid-range to even mid to high-end GPU market. I mean, who would have ever guessed that AMD would be able to get their APUs this unbelievably powerful? From what we've seen, we're potentially looking at around a 4070 level of performance. So depending on how well this is priced, it could be a massive hit. Fingers crossed they somehow find a way to eventually bring these to desktop. So while that does it for today, which Ryzen Max APU are you most excited about? The 16-core or 12-core? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to check out the early Black Friday sales down in the description below. And as always, have a great day.